The jungle was silent, unnaturally so. A thick mist coiled low across the forest floor, carrying the scent of scorched metal and blood. The trees, tall and alien in structure, bent and arched with bulbous canopies that hissed faintly in the still air. The remains of a shattered patrol transport lay smoldering behind them, its hull cracked open like an egg. And there, in the middle of the carnage, walked a girl, barely 19, human, helmet off, hair slick with sweat, eyes unfazed. Her pace was steady, confident even. Beside her, a shadow moved, fluid and lethal. It wasn't a mech, nor any known creature of Earth. Standing at nearly 3 meters tall, it looked like a nightmare woven from speed and silence. A creature of coiled muscle, sinewy limbs, and an angular skull with eyes like twin suns eclipsed. It moved like smoke, no sound, no threat. Yet the message it radiated was unmistakable. Touch her and die. The last remaining enemy scout, hidden among the rocks, couldn't tear his eyes away. He didn't fire. He didn't speak. He only watched in silence as the two vanished into the mist. One of flesh and heart, the other a killing machine disguised in the skin of an apex predator. Later, when the footage reached command, no one believed it at first. A low-ranked recruit, just 3 weeks out of Earth's orbital training base, accompanied by a native predator of Almora, the most hostile planet humanity had ever set foot on? Impossible. Illogical. Absurd. And yet, the image didn't lie. Her name was Aria Lance. She wasn't bred for war. Not like the others. The sons and daughters of Earth's elite came with muscle enhancements, psychoreactive armor, and family legacies carved into battlefield archives. Aria came from a Dome City slum, her mother a sanitation tech, her father a question mark on her birth file. She had no name to live up to, no one to mourn her if she didn't return. She was just trying to escape gravity. 6 months ago, she'd signed the enlistment contract in a small, windowless recruitment center. The recruiter, a bored veteran with half a lung and one synthetic eye, had looked her over like he was choosing a nail to hammer. You're 5 kilos underweight, and your file says you failed your first combat sim. I passed the second one, she had replied. He tapped his stylus against his pad. Why? Because I want off this planet, she answered. I want a different sky. He stared at her for a long time after that, then stamped the file. Her orders came a week later. Valmora 9. Uncolonized. High mortality rate. A perfect dumping ground for cannon fodder like her. Aria didn't expect to live long. She had made peace with that. The moment her boots hit Valmora's rust-red soil, she inhaled the heavy, moist air and told herself not to dream of tomorrow. The base was little more than a fortified crater, its walls constantly repaired from night attacks. The predators of the planet, Velox, they were called, were intelligent, coordinated, and seemingly without fear. On her first patrol, she watched one leap 20 feet through an electrified perimeter fence, ripping a man's throat out before falling to the volleys of pulse fire. The squad cheered. Aria didn't. She wasn't a coward, but she didn't see the war the way others did. Her squad mates, people like Rennick, Garan, and Juno, treated Valmora's natives like targets. To them, the beasts weren't sentient. They were sport, obstacle, proof of their strength. Every kill was another stripe on their armor. But Aria watched how the Velox mourned their dead. She watched them carry wounded off into the trees. She saw one weep, a low, keening vibration, over the body of its fallen kin before retreating into the shadows. She didn't speak of it. She couldn't. Sympathy for the enemy was a court-martial offense. So she kept quiet and survived. 3 weeks in, the mission that changed everything was a standard recon op. They'd received pings of movement too close to the outer sensor grid. Command suspected another migration wave of Velox. The squad was ordered to confirm, eliminate, and return. Aria was the last to drop from the shuttle, rifle clutched tightly in hand. Rain fell in slow sheets, warm and acidic. The jungle pulsed with bioluminescent life. Leaves the size of vehicles shifted above them, and from every direction, the sounds of a world untamed filled the silence. They fanned out. Garia moved point. Juno hung back with the portable scanner. Aria moved toward the perimeter, drawn by a low, rhythmic sound she couldn't quite explain. She found it in a clearing soaked in blood. A Valak, smaller than usual, maybe a juvenile, lay on its side, one leg twisted grotesquely, a metal shard embedded in its gut. It bled slowly, breathing shallow. Its eyes fluttered open as she approached, golden and sharp, brimming with pain. Aria froze. Instinct screamed at her to raise the rifle. She didn't. Her fingers trembled, but didn't move. She stepped forward, slowly, kneeling beside the creature. It watched her, unblinking. She reached out, barely a breath of space between them, and wrapped her hand around the metal shard. "This is going to hurt," she whispered. It didn't flinch. The metal came free with a wet sound. The creature hissed, but didn't lash out. Aria tore a strip from her undershirt, pressed it to the wound, and held it tight. All around, the jungle seemed to hold its breath. A crackle in her calm startled her. "Lance, where the hell are you?" She looked down at the Valak. Its eyes had closed again. Shallow breaths. "Dying. I found a body," she said. "Tagging now." She marked it as deceased, a common lie on recon missions. No one would check. And then she walked away. 2 days passed before she saw it again. Her squad had been ambushed outside the western ridge, half torn apart in the chaos. She'd been thrown against a rock, barely conscious. Through blurred vision, she saw one of the larger Valaks stalking toward her, only to suddenly stop. Another had entered the field. It was the juvenile. Alive. Grown. Changed. Its body was still healing, but it stood tall, proud, blood-soaked and furious. It lunged, not at her, but at the attacker. What followed was a blur of claws and shrieks and silence. When Aria awoke, she was alone, covered in leaves. Her squad was gone. The Valak that had saved her was gone too. Command sent a search party. She said little, just that she'd survive by hiding. They accepted it, but it wasn't the end. The Valak followed her. Every mission, every patrol, always out of sight, but never far. It never attacked. It watched. It waited. And when danger came, it intervened. Quietly. Precisely. Never seen by others, but always there. She began to leave food for it. Just rations at first. It accepted. Then water. Then company. They never spoke. But there was understanding. And as the weeks turned to months, her legend grew. Whispers started among the troops. The girl with the ghost. The silent protector. The human with a monster shadow. But she knew better. It wasn't a monster. It was something more. Something wounded. Something that remembered pain. And kindness. Her kindness. By the time she walked through the smoldering battlefield with the Valak at her side, there was no longer fear in her eyes. Only purpose. And the enemy, those who would have ended her without hesitation, could only watch as the predator passed them by, not with a roar, but with a promise. One carved into every step it took beside the girl. She was no longer just a recruit. She was something else now, and the world would soon know it. The morning air bit into Aria's skin as she adjusted the weight of her pack, fingers stiff against the chilled alloy of her pulse rifle. Dawn on Velmora. 9 wasn't golden. It was blue. Cold blue mist blanketed the land in silence, veiling the world in a hue that made blood look black and shadows infinite. She moved through it with the discipline of a soldier, but her expression betrayed no sense of belonging. She didn't walk like the others, no swagger, no rhythm, just purpose that clung to her like armor, fragile but determined. Sergeant Rennick barked a command, and the squad shifted, boots slapping against stone and root. They were a motley crew of survivors, half trained, half insane. Gar ran, broad-shouldered and cruel behind every smile, glanced back at her with the usual smirk. He liked to play games. Aria had learned that quickly. Games with knives. Games with nerves. Juno, the medic, walked silently beside him, her eyes unreadable beneath a cracked visor. No one really talked much. Not anymore. They were heading east. Another sweep through Sector D, what Command called the Red Veins, named for the crimson sap that oozed from the trees like blood under pressure. The Volaks liked to nest there, or hunt, depending on the day. Every patrol felt more like bait than recon. Aria scanned the horizon, noting subtle shifts in the mist, the faint tremors in the undergrowth. The jungle was always alive, but lately it felt aware, watching. The mission was routine on paper. Sweep and verify no Volak nests within 5 clicks of Outpost 6. The last team sent and hadn't returned. The assumption was obvious. Volak territory. Another containable loss. She hated that phrase. Containable loss meant lives that didn't matter. Names that wouldn't be remembered. People like her. Recruits with no connections. No promotions waiting. No family waiting back on Earth. You died, and your rations were redistributed. Still, she moved forward. One boot after another. The jungle swallowed the squad in slow gulps, and the sounds of the base faded into nothing. It took an hour to reach the ridgeline that overlooked the basin. There, the world unfolded in alien splendor. Massive root structures like petrified serpents, tree canopies tangled like a spider's trap, and a silence so perfect it screamed danger. Rennick raised a hand. The squad halted. Movement below. For shapes. Humanoid. Torn armor. Half submerged in sticky mud. Aria's breath caught. Not Volaks. Humans. Juno moved forward to confirm. Confirmed, she said. Squad Alpha 2. No vitals. The squad tensed. Garan grunted. Told them not to camp near the bleed routes. Aria's gaze drifted beyond the bodies. Deep tracks, almost circular, pressed into the earth, claw marks, heavy and sharp. Volak movement. Recent. Too recent. Rennick barked orders, motioning for the team to spread out and recon the perimeter. Aria moved northwest, her boots sinking slightly into the wet soil. She kept her rifle up, her senses stretched thin like thread pulled over broken glass. Every shadow was a threat, every breeze a whisper, and then she saw it. Blood. Not red, but silvery green, splattered across a fallen trunk like paint. She crouched low, examining the viscous fluid. Volak blood. Still warm. Branches cracked behind her. She spun. Nothing. She waited, breath tight in her chest. Silence returned. She exhaled slowly and turned back to the blood. But the trail was gone. No, not gone. Wiped. She straightened, heart hammering. Something had erased its own blood trail. That wasn't instinct. That was strategy. She radioed in. Possible wounded Volak. Northwest quadrant. Blood pattern indicates intelligence. Static for a moment, then Garen's voice. Or maybe you're seeing things again, recruit. Copy that. Rennick added with a sigh. Keep eyes open. We move in 10. The connection cut. Aria tightened her grip on the rifle. That's when she heard it. A low, breathy rasp just behind her shoulder. She spun, weapon raised. Nothing. But the mist shifted unnaturally, curling in a spiral before dispersing. She turned in a slow circle. I know you're there, she whispered. The jungle responded with silence. Back at the ridge, the squad was regrouping. Juno was already marking the recovered tags from the fallen team, storing them in a pouch like coins. Rennick motioned them forward. They had orders to burn the site, remove any traces, and fall back. But the jungle had other plans. It started with a scream. Garen's voice, short and sharp, cut off mid-breath. The squad spun, rifles raised. Nothing but trees and fog. Then came the second. Juno, her form yanked into the canopy, so fast Aria barely caught the flash of movement. Her body dropped seconds later, throat torn open, blood mixing with the mist. Rennick opened fire into the trees. Pulse rounds lit up the branches in flickers of white and blue. Chaos. Screams. Shadows. Something moved between them faster than logic could follow. Aria dropped low, pressing her back against a thick root. Her breath came ragged. Her rifle was useless now. She could barely see 5 feet ahead. She waited, counted her heartbeats, and then she saw it. Not attacking, not running, watching. Golden eyes in the mist, locked on hers. Steady, familiar. Recognition jolted through her. The juvenile. No, older now. Fully grown. Healed. He didn't move. Neither did she. And then the world erupted again. Gunfire. Screaming. Bodies crashing through foliage. The predator broke eye contact, vanishing like smoke. Aria staggered to her feet, searching for any sign of her squad. Gone. All of them. Rennick's helmet lay crushed near a root. Blood painted the ground in wide arcs. The only sound now was the soft drip of fluid from the trees. And a breath behind her. She turned slowly. It was him. He stood less than 10 feet away. Claws slick, breath rising in soft plumes. He didn't lunge, didn't bare teeth. Just stood there, eyes studying her like she was the only thing in the world that made sense. Her weapon trembled in her hands. She didn't raise it. He tilted his head slightly, as if puzzled by her fear. Then, with the grace of a predator bored of killing, he turned and began walking into the jungle. Aria didn't know why she followed. Each step felt like betrayal. Of her training. Of her dead. Of herself. But she followed. They walked for what felt like hours. The jungle began to change. Less hostile. More primal. Here, the trees were older, their roots like bones, their trunks wrapped in shimmering fungi. Eventually, they came to a clearing, a circle of earth, sunlit from a break in the canopy above. In the center lay a pile of scavenged items, scrap metal, fragments of armor, bones both human and otherwise. A den. She looked at him. He sat, chest rising steadily, posture calm. Not threatening. Waiting. For what? She stepped forward slowly and sat across from him, the tension in her spine melting into something stranger. Curiosity. Recognition. This was the same Valak she'd saved weeks ago. The same eyes. The same limp, now barely visible. But why bring her here? Then he moved, slowly, gently, reaching behind him. He pulled something from the bone pile. A piece of cloth, her undershirt fragment, the one she'd used to wrap his wound. It was stained, torn, but unmistakable. He laid it gently before her. Aria's throat tightened. This wasn't an animal. This was a memory, a bond. She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she didn't see danger. She saw understanding, debt, trust. In that moment, something between them changed. He stood again, turning toward the jungle. The message was clear. Follow. Not as prey, as something more. And she did. Without fear. Without hesitation. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that from that moment forward, the planet had already chosen sides. And she had just become the heart of something no one could stop. The sun never truly shone on Velmora. 9. But in the weeks that followed the massacre at Sector D, the light that filtered through the canopy grew warmer to Aria's eyes. She no longer traveled as part of Squad. She moved with something older, something primal, her silent companion, the predator who had once been her enemy. He still hadn't given her a name, at least not in words, but she had started calling him Ghost. It suited him, silent, swift, lethal. Yet behind those alien eyes lingered a strange patience, as though he were waiting for her to understand something beyond language. Ghost never led her back to a nest, never showed her others of his kind. Perhaps there were none left. Or perhaps she was the only one meant to see this side of him. He would hunt at night, bringing down creatures twice her size, then return at dawn and drop the carcass before her like a gift. She learned to eat what he ate. She learned what not to touch, what plants hissed before they poisoned, which rivers were too quiet to be safe. But the jungle was not the only thing watching them. Drones. They came low and slow, their rotors muffled, scanning with red beams through the trees. Recon units from Outpost 6, maybe 7. Her disappearance hadn't gone unnoticed. But they weren't looking to rescue. They were hunting, cleaning up loose ends, anomalies. Ghost always spotted them first. He would freeze, then vanish, leaving her just enough time to bury herself in leaves or slip beneath the roots until the sound passed overhead. The drones never lingered. They couldn't afford to. Their fuel was limited, and Velmora didn't tolerate machines for long. Aria was changing too. Her uniform had long since been stripped of rank or symbol. Her skin now bore thin scars from branches, claws, and ritual markings she didn't understand. She moved differently, shoulders lowered, steps silent. Her eyes had sharpened, catching the twitch of a leaf or the crackle of distant energy. But inside, she was still herself, haunted by the screams of her squad, by the realization that she might never see another human again. One evening, as dusk bled blue across the treetops, Ghost brought her to a clearing unlike any she had seen. The ground was scorched in concentric rings. In the center stood a pillar, metal, blackened, partially buried, marked by ancient symbols that glowed faintly in the growing dark. Ghost touched the surface with one claw, and the glow brightened. A memory node. That's what it looked like. He turned to her, watching. She stepped closer, heart pounding. The air shimmered around the pillar, and suddenly her vision blurred. The jungle vanished. In its place, a city of towers, silver and black, spiraling into a sky filled with green stars. Valak voices chanted in harmony, their language a blend of vibration and growl. She saw Ghost, smaller, younger, running beside a taller Valak with armor etched in gold. A mentor, a leader. She felt a sense of pride, belonging. Then fire. Explosions ripped through the city. Ships fell like stones from orbit. Humans in powered exosuits descended, guns blazing. Valaks fought back, but they were overwhelmed. Their defense wasn't just military. It was sacred. She saw them trying to protect something deeper, something beneath the city. Then darkness. The vision ended. The jungle returned. She staggered back, gasping. Ghost remained silent. Aria understood now. The war hadn't been about territory. It had been about extermination. Humanity hadn't just colonized Velmora. They had destroyed a civilization. Ghost wasn't just a survivor. He was the last. That night, she sat beside him beneath the vines and stared at the stars through a crack in the trees. Her mind reeled with the images. She had grown up believing humans were always the explorers, the rescuers, the righteous. But now she had seen what their command had buried. Ghost didn't sleep. He never did. When she asked him why once, he just pointed toward the trees. Always watching. Always hunted. By morning, the jungle gave them another warning. Smoke. Not from fire. From machinery. She climbed a ridge and saw it. Rows of black-shelled vehicles pushing through the underbrush, clearing paths with flamethrowers and plasma cutters. Armored soldiers followed, guns at the ready. Drones buzzed overhead in flocks. Operation Sweep. She'd heard whispers about it before she vanished. A classified initiative meant to stabilize Velmora's wildlife, eliminate all remaining threats. They were here for Ghost, and maybe, unknowingly, for her. He saw them too, crouched beside her, golden eyes narrowed. He did not snarl. He did not flee. He waited. Aria realized then he had known this day would come. That night, she made a decision. They couldn't run forever. Not with the jungle burning behind them. Not with soldiers closing in like hounds. She needed to confront the people who had sent her here. She needed to speak the truth about the massacre, about the civilization humanity had buried, about the predator who had shown more mercy than any commander she had ever served. Ghost watched as she packed her gear. No rifle, no armor, just a pulse beacon and a translation chip she had scavenged from Juno's ruined kit. She turned to him. "I have to go," she said. He tilted his head. "I won't survive if I bring you with me. But if I can talk to them, if I can prove you're not what they think." She stopped. Even she didn't believe it fully. Ghost approached slowly, then did something he had never done before. He touched his forehead to hers. It lasted only a second, but it was enough. Then he stepped back into the trees. Gone. She activated the beacon. The jungle responded in kind. Within hours, a patrol found her. A lone, wounded recruit, presumed dead. They didn't question much. Just restrained her, cuffed her, and hauled her onto a transport bound for Command Base Delta. The base was steel and silence, suspended over a ravine, built like a cage for monsters they didn't understand. Aria was stripped, scanned, interrogated. She told them everything. About the ambush, about the squad, about the Valak. They laughed at first, thought she had gone feral. But when she showed them the translation chip and the footage stored on her wrist drive, images of the ruined city, the memory pillar, they stopped laughing. Now they whispered. Aria knew the signs of a cover-up in motion. They wouldn't let this go public. Not without burying her first. She sat in the holding cell, staring at the flickering light above, wondering if she had made a mistake. Maybe she should have stayed in the jungle, vanished with Ghost, let the war die in silence. Then the lights cut out. Emergency sirens wailed. A breach. Aria stood. The steel wall to her left groaned, then exploded inward. Smoke and sparks filled the air. And there he stood. Ghost. Covered in soot and blood, but alive. His eyes locked on hers. Not with rage, but with clarity. He hadn't come to kill. He had come to take her home. Aria didn't hesitate. She ran. Through corridors lit by fire. Past soldiers cut down without cruelty. Paralyzed. Not dead. Ghost moved like a shadow beside her, carving a path through chaos. By the time they reached the hangar, the base was crumbling. One final drone tried to intercept them. Ghost tore it from the air with a snarl, then leapt with her into the jungle below. They landed in the canopy, bounced off branches, and rolled into the soft undergrowth. Silence returned. Aria lay still, heart pounding. Ghost crouched beside her, unharmed. He looked at her. She looked back. No words. Only breath. Only trust. And somewhere, behind the canopy, the stars blinked like watching gods. The fight wasn't over. But neither of them would run again. The jungle no longer looked like a prison. After the raid on Command Base Delta, after the blood and smoke and silence that followed, it had become a sanctuary again. Only this time, it was not about hiding. It was about building, about remembering. Aria sat cross-legged at the edge of the riverbank, her reflection fractured by the current. Her once standard-issue uniform was now a patchwork of jungle fibers, Valak hide, and utility scraps. In her hands, she cradled a small device, part data core, part translator, jury-rigged from the ruins of the base, and enhanced with alien memory threads Ghost had retrieved from the forgotten places of his homeland. He watched her quietly from the trees, his golden eyes patient. He had brought her here not to hide, not to survive, but to learn, to carry forward the story his people had lost. And she was beginning to understand that survival alone was never the goal. Truth was, through that device, she listened to the echoes of Valak culture, the hum of rituals, the calls of their kin before extinction claimed them. Their history wasn't stored in words, but in vibration, emotion, and encoded visions that poured into her when she dared to link minds with the core. Each time she connected, her mind expanded, her thoughts no longer confined to linear time. She saw Ghost's memories, a child trained in silence, a warrior stripped of his tribe, a lone sentinel surviving because he refused to let his people vanish into ash without remembrance. One night, she dreamed, not in fragments, but in clarity, a vision not from the data, but her own mind. In it, she stood between two armies. On one side, humans clean and uniformed, eyes devoid of understanding. On the other, shadows of Valak's long gone, proud and sorrowful. She was the bridge, the only one who had walked both paths and returned not as a weapon, but as a witness. When she awoke, Ghost was beside her. He placed something in her palm, a thin shard of black stone etched with runes that glowed faintly at her touch. Not a weapon, a symbol, recognition, responsibility. Days passed, then weeks. Word would have reached the upper echelons of command. An entire base destroyed. Footage leaked, possibly broadcast by defectors before being silenced. A predator seen not as a monster, but as a protector. The first dropships came quiet and fast. Aria spotted them before they entered the jungle proper. No insignia. Black Ops. No interest in diplomacy. They came to a race, to sterilize the anomaly. She counted 3 squads, each with advanced scanning suits and drone support. Not infantry. Executioners. She didn't run this time. She set traps, relayed ghost positions, and together they neutralized the first team without a sound. The second found only corpses. Well, not corpses, but men tied to trees, stripped of weapons and dignity, left with nothing but the horror of survival. The third team changed tactics. They sent out speakers, not for negotiation, for propaganda. This is recruit Aria Solon, formerly of the 11th Division. She is mentally compromised. If you see her, report immediately. She is armed and dangerous. Her name echoed through the valley like a curse. Ghost heard it too. That night, as they sat by the flames, she touched his arm. They're trying to erase me. He looked at her, tilted his head in the way he always did when thinking deeply. Then he drew something in the dirt. 2 circles, intersecting, one marked with Valak runes, the other with standard human script. In the center, the symbol he'd given her. Not erase, she said softly. Divide. He grunted in agreement. The following day, she found a half-destroyed transmitter near a fallen observation tower. With Ghost's help, she scavenged enough parts to boost a signal far beyond the local network. She didn't send coordinates. She sent truth. Through the translation matrix, through visuals and narrative stitched from Ghost's memory cores, and her own footage, she created a message. Not a plea for rescue. A challenge. She showed the cities that once stood beneath Valmora's soil. She showed the massacre of her team. How Ghost had spared her. How he had offered protection, not death. She ended the broadcast with a single phrase, in both Valak resonance and English. We are more than what they say. Then they ran again, not in retreat, but in strategy. The dropships would come faster now. Orbital strikes weren't out of the question. She and Ghost moved toward the mountains, high into places where even drones lost their signal. There, among the cliffs, she found remnants of temples carved into stone, monuments of a faith older than Earth's own records. And in those temples, others. They were smaller, thinner, veiled in camouflage. Valaks. Ghost bowed low before them, and they returned the gesture with a vibration that made the air pulse. Aria stood frozen. She had believed he was the last. He wasn't. He was the scout, the protector, the one who watched until it was safe to return. The others approached her slowly, not with suspicion, but with reverence. They touched the shard she wore around her neck, the one Ghost had given her, and uttered a tone that translated to bearer. She stayed with them for 3 days. Learned their tongue, learned their grief. They had waited decades beneath the surface, living in caverns, preserving culture in silence. And Ghost had protected them all from afar, never returning for fear he would be followed. Now, he had returned because she had proven it was possible to bridge the divide. She knew then what she had to do. The final message wasn't sent from a transmitter or a stolen drone. It was carved into the side of a cliff that faced the stars. With Ghost's help, she used the runes of the Valak and the universal codes of human programming to leave a beacon etched in stone, an invitation. We are still here, and we remember. In the days that followed, the jungle quieted. The dropships stopped coming, but new signals began to stir in the upper atmosphere. Some were curious, some were fearful, but none could ignore the voice that had come from the wilderness. Aria stood beside Ghost one evening as the stars blinked awake, no longer symbols of conquest, but of connection. She placed a hand on his shoulder, and he placed his claws over hers. They didn't speak. They didn't need to, because the war wasn't over. But the silence had been broken, and in the spaces where fear once grew, something new was beginning to rise. Hope.